Considering the amount of work that I see all around this room, I would say that you have maybe about 300,000. Congratulations.
Hold on just a minute.
When it comes to buying storage lockers, most would admit that it's very much a game of hit or miss. Mainly because there have been TV shows and other series that have hyped up going and getting storage lockers and finding untold treasures. But that only happens in a small percentage of said units. But that being said, if you are lucky enough to go and get one of those best units, you could be in for a real treat, because in those shows and in just regular life, people have found some absolutely stunning stuff in storage lockers. So allow us to show you 9 of the most lucky storage unit finds. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 9. Legendary cars. There are certain things that are considered holy grail items in a storage unit. One of the biggest ones is cars. For if a car is put into a unit, it's often because it has value either to the owner or to the world at large. There was once a James Bond car put into a storage unit, and one that might even be more shocking is that a perfect replica of the legendary KITT car from Knight Rider was put into a storage unit and found by a very lucky buyer. Could you imagine being that person? Having the Knight Rider car and then just deciding to put it into a storage unit? Why? Why would you do that? We bet the person loved driving around in a KITT car before selling it.
Beautiful. You know what these things go for if they run? Easy 25,000 pounds.
How much?
Number 8. The Holy Grail of Toys. Daryl Sheets, known as the Gambler on Storage Wars, is known for making major purchases on gut instinct alone, and more times than not, getting paid big time as a result. In this case, it came in the form of a comic book and toy collection that he purchased back in Season 5, which he literally dubbed the Holy Grail of Toys. The locker contained an endless supply of G.I. Joes, Hot Wheels, and a whole host of other collectible dolls and toys, along with an absolutely massive collection of comics. We're talking 3,000 books, which were valued at approximately $10 apiece. The count kept rising, finally settling on a total that topped $90,000. It's important to re-emphasize that these aren't modern toys that were found. They were a plethora of vintage and classic toys and cars that were extremely valuable, showing you that sometimes the toys you buy for cheap could eventually become something infinitely more valuable one day. Number 7. Video Game Collection. Moving from comics to video games, the first episode of Season 10 of Storage Wars featured another huge find, this time going to bidder Renee Nezoda, who landed the locker for a meager $1,500. The haul? Video games. Lots of them. The collection was monstrous, filling up a large locker and clearly assembled by a collector who knew their stuff. Throughout the very long process of adding up the endless procession of vintage entertainment,
This is the first box, and it's packed with games. If they don't like this,
pieces, it quickly became apparent that this wasn't just a massive pile of surplus. There was nary a duplicate in the mix, with a dusty pile of memorabilia containing everything from rare Sega Genesis games to a copy of the NES game Bubble Bobble Part 2 that was worth several $100s on its own. The whole collection, once it had been painstakingly counted up, was worth upwards of $50,000. Number 6. Vending machines. Backing things up to the early moments of Season 2 of Storage Wars, in the second episode of the season, Dave Hester weaseled his way into a locker purchase that was very much worth it. At first glance, the unit seemed to be full of nothing but old, broken vending machines, and Hester did his best to play it off as more trouble than it was worth. Hester had managed to get a glimpse of some newer models in the back. Once his bit of acting had discouraged others from bothering with the unit, he proceeded to snatch it up for the bargain price of roughly $1,300. And the master of misdirection made his way into the unit, where he proceeded to uncover a whopping $27,000 and then some in new and used vending machines. Number 5. Pirate Treasure. While Storage Wars has had a long and successful run showcasing hundreds of different storage units and their contents, a couple of incidents have shown that the biggest finds don't always take place in front of the camera. This was the case when a story broke several years ago in which Dan and Laura Dodson, the hosts of the show, revealed that an ecstatic new storage locker owner who had chosen to remain anonymous had gotten something truly legendary. In an interview, the pair explained how one lucky customer had picked up a pair of units for less than $2,000, only to discover that one of them literally had pirate's treasure in it. From gold doubloons to pieces of 8, all 200 years or older, the haul added up to $500,000 in gold coins. That's not something that should happen, but it did, and it made bank as a result. Number 4. Elvis memorabilia. Back in the early days of Storage Wars, Dave Hester happily filled the role of resident baddie, But Hester was still a savvy player who did well during his time on the program. The best example of his success came all the way back in the first season, when Hester bought a storage unit that was loaded with newspapers. At first, it seemed that all Hester had done was purchase a load of outdated periodicals. But then he discovered that the stash was all from the same day, August 16, 1977. Sound familiar? That's the day Elvis Presley died. The unit ended up being a gold mine, with a plethora of papers all sporting the King of Rock and Roll's face adding up to a staggering $90,000. Anything Elvis related would have been incredible, but this was much more than that, and it showed. Number 3. The original Superman comic. In April 2011, the first Superman comic, called Action Comics No. 1, was discovered by a California collectibles expert in a storage unit in San Fernando Valley, according to ABC News. Upon finding it, the buyer gave it back to actor Nicolas Cage, whom it had been stolen from years prior. So how exactly did all of this happen? You see, a while after Cage bought the comic, his house was robbed. They took a lot of valuables, and that included the legendary comic. Eventually, it was pawned off by the robbers, and in a rare twist of fate, it made it back to the collector who sold Cage the comic in the first place. Talk about a roundabout route, eh? The story of the comic and how it had been stolen and yet brought back to the owner via Cage, albeit briefly, shows that sometimes hope does win in the end. A very Superman kind of ending, if you will. Number 2. Marshall and Wendell. While he wasn't particularly remembered for his huge paydays, Barry Weiss, known as the Collector, was a staple of Storage Wars during its early seasons. But back in the 4th episode of Season 1, he got something truly special. In the episode, an oddball locker was opened up that seemed to be filled with nothing more than saloon paraphernalia. Apparently dead set on opening up his own barbershop, Weiss snapped up the unit for $275. When he got inside, though, he was pleasantly surprised to find a 1928 Marshall and Wendell piano among the hair supplies. The value? Between $10,000 and $12,000. Number 1. The Frank Gutierrez Collection. If you search for the biggest recorded find on Storage Wars, chances are one storage unit is going to show up every time. The unit was purchased way back in Season 3 by none other than Daryl Sheets, the gambler himself. He spent a paltry, in retrospect at least, $3,600 on a locker that looked interesting but not particularly special. Imagine the big shot surprise when he discovered that it was home to a whole slew of paintings by Frank Gutierrez. When the proud new owner brought in an art expert to price out the stash, he was floored to find out that the whole collection was worth upwards of $300,000. While some disagree with the appraisal, according to the show's stated value, it remains one of the largest storage unit finds on record. That doesn't mean you should gamble every time you see a piece of art, though. Seriously, don't do that. While there's no doubt that Sheets here made a killing on this art collection, that doesn't mean that every piece of art you see in a storage locker is worth something. That's not how it works. But still, seeing something like this? Yeah, that's enough to get you into the auction world, no doubt. Because if something like this kind of a payday is out there waiting for you, you'd be willing to take a risk or two, right? So what do you think? What do you think of this look at the storage lockers and units that have provided people with some of the most incredible finds of all time? Can you believe that such rare and valuable items were stored and forgotten about in such units? What items do you wish you personally could have found in a storage locker? Do you know of other lucky and incredible finds that were made? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.